All right, hey, Jeff here. So, I got a few new pieces in this past week that I would quickly share. In my last video, I'd mentioned I hadn't gotten any, and honestly, I've been really starting to be more thoughtful, less impulse, more, as I'm logging all my music on Discogs, which I found a bunch of CDs that were more pop oriented I had not done. So now, I mentioned in the last video, I had cataloged everything, but now I've cataloged everything because there was probably about another 100 CDs that were in a different area that I'd forgotten to do. And I've sold a couple on there too. I think I mentioned last time too, I sold one actually today for like $50. So anyway, I've been trying to be more selective just when I realize how much stuff I have and how prone I am to just collect for the sake of collecting. I'm just like, do I really need this? And there's some people would say, no, you don't need it, but you want it. So, but I gotta be a little more respectful of the money and all of that. So I've been trying to hold back and not order as much unless it's something I just absolutely have to have. So I've been trying to not go to the stores as much just because I know I'm going to be tempted, even though today my wife's out of town again. I'm still working with her father down in North Carolina to get him up to par, and so she's been going down there every couple weekends, and I'm free to run out to the store. I probably am going to end up going to one of the record stores today. Just me and my daughter. So anyway, I'll probably have another video to make. Anyway, but for now, I was able to go by one of the stores that I go by on my way home from work often when I have time. And grabbed a couple items. This I was surprised to find. I don't think I'd ever really studied long enough to see if this was a vinyl thing that I was looking for, and I'm surprised it wasn't. But well, it's not one of the more popular ones. But got a picture. I got a copy of Night Ranger's Man in Motion. Now, to me, this is probably the end of an era for Night Ranger. This was, I think, one of the last really good albums before there was this was 88, I believe. They took a couple years there where there wasn't a whole lot of action. They brought out that Mojo one where it was like only two or three, like three of the guys. It was it was a good album, but it wasn't what I would consider a solid Night Ranger album. And then they kind of started picking back up in the mid 90s, Neverland, things like that. I love everything they do. But this is the end of an era when you've got just the solid 80s stuff with a lot of the hits. This one was probably the one that was less known. But it's a really good album. I love Man in Motion, some of that stuff. I don't think I'd ever even been on the lookout for this on vinyl, but there it was. And I grabbed it. And what's really neat is that this is the end of the actual vinyl era for Night Ranger until they started reissuing some of the stuff, in the past year or two. But you go back and look at the catalog, this fits right in. So we have Dawn Patrol, the first album, on vinyl, of course. And then you have Midnight Madness. This is a big one with all the big hits. These are the early stuff. I think Dawn Patrol is probably still one of my overall favorite albums by them. But all of these albums, first three especially, but all these five are great. Seven Wishes. Big Life, and then I think I showed this once before, but it's an import. It's got the really weird. I don't know who did that artwork, but it just doesn't. It's weird. It's like cut white background overlay. It's not good photoshopping. Of course, in the 80s, I don't know how they did it, but anyway, great album, Big Life, and then so now Man in Motion. So these are essentially the first, really the only five that were released on vinyl, because by the time these rolled around late 80s, things started being more CD related. So I wasn't even, when I look back in catalog, I'm like, oh, look, this is the last vinyl. So I got the first five. That really, and like I say, they have some of their newer releases. The past couple releases have come out on vinyl, and I would like to get those. But it's nice to have all of the original ones, and like I said, there's a couple there in the middle in the 90s that don't have any kind of vinyl releases. So anyway, so I grabbed that, kept flipping, and was surprised to find this copy of Van Halen 1984. Now this is the original press. This is not the reissue. I think the only other one I've got Van Halen wise was one of the reissues. I kind of had started leaning towards maybe thinking I was just going to go ahead and buy the reissues. There was a copy of Diver Down the other day at this other record store, which we are going to today. But I think the price wasn't exactly right as far as what I wanted to pay for it. Diver Down's one of my... I really love that album. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but it takes me back to a time of my life. I just remember wearing that. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this, 1984. Which honestly, when this came out, we were kind of like, ew, keyboard Van Halen. I remember hearing Jump on the radio. We all sat by the radio. It was coming. World premiere of the new Van Halen song on our local station here as a teen. And we all gathered around it and waited to hear. And we heard Jump. And we were like, it was not what we wanted to hear from Van Halen. Of course, it went on to be a big hit, regardless of what we thought. Then the album came out, and there are a bunch of amazing songs on here. But to a degree, and maybe it was because it was overplayed, or maybe it was just a style, but to a degree, I kind of got sick of this album. I go back and visit it now and then, and, you know, House of Pain, Girl Gone Bad, things like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. These are some really cool stuff. But then there are some of their albums, the earlier stuff, of course, anything prior to this, that never seem to get old. And Diver Down is one of those, even though it's probably less favored to most people than that one. I don't know. I just love the diversity. I love everything about that album, so I do want to have that on vinyl. I have Fair Warning now. It would be hard to it would be really hard to categorize my top Van Halen albums. I don't know. Fair Warning would be up there. Women and Children First. It'd be hard. There's some great stuff. And I'm just talking the Van Halen years, not the Van Hagar years. Even that's Van Halen too. Okay, moving on. Let's not get into a discussion on Van Halen. Next one I found, so I got done with that record store. I had a few minutes before I had to go to my meeting in that part of town, so I'm like, I can make it to the thrift store right across the street and see if they got anything. I went over there. They had a bunch of stuff, like twice as much vinyl as they had the last time I was there. But of course, it all tends to be the typical stuff that you see everywhere. In this case, though, there was a lot of more. Somebody must have gotten an entire like gospel section in, just lots and lots of Christian early gospel music. And one caught my eye as I'm flipping through it. I'm like, boom, Larry Norman Up on This Rock. Now, here comes my puppy trying to break in my room. Larry Norman Up on This Rock. First Larry Norman album, I guess you could say solo. He had done a couple albums with the band The People. Hi, Coda. And this album would be, a lot of people call this, now he'd be the grandfather, but he was kind of like the father of Christian rock because this was cutting edge at the time in 1969 when it was released. Because it was more like mainstream music than it was gospel Christian music. Listen to this now, you're like, how is that considered, the father of rock? Well, you go back in the time, it would have been. I already have this. But this is one of those records where if I see it, I'm like, I got to rescue it. And it was in great shape. The vinyl, I was like, wow, it's in great shape. I already have it. And it is, I don't know all the details, but it's an Impact release. See, it says Impact right there, which from what I've kind of glanced at online, this is a reissue, but there's no date on here as to when it was reissued. All it has is the copyright date of 69 and 70. Maybe it was reissued in 70. That's the only latest date they've got on here. It's on Impact label. But I had to get it just because I could give it to somebody. So if, and I'm thinking one or two people in general who might appreciate this. So I'm thinking I might give it away, even though once I got it home and pulled out my other copy, I found out that they are different. They're both Impact. They're both that same reissue. If you kind of notice, you can't really tell probably on the camera. This cover is a little darker in the way that it's printed. The ink is just a little darker than this one. Seems to be a little lighter. This one has a white border around the edges. If you see this here, it's like it's, that's the wrong side. This side over here. See this white border right here? That's not on this other one. This other one is clean print, and it doesn't have that border. The other thing interesting about the original one that I only recently noticed, it was the original one, right? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't this. I'm sorry. It's the second one. Anyway, there was one thing that's different. Is one of them has etchings around that say to Elizabeth, and it's got like a dedication on it, whereas the other one that I originally had did not have that. So definitely a different print with different those etchings that go around the thing. So that was different, but they're both in really good shape. Part of me wants to kind of keep them both, but I don't really want to be that type of collector. So if anybody out there would like a VCLT of some Larry Norman, still one of my favorite albums. I love Larry Norman. I have like 50 of his CDs and slowly building up more of my vinyl collection. Still one of my favorites. So if anybody out there is, very much a fan or would be, just interested to have one of these, I have to decide which one I'm going to let go. But I have two now, and I'm not willing necessarily to keep it. Now, this next one I bought, I'm not a big fan of the band. Only I've heard, some of their hits. I bought this for two reasons. First off, it's old, 1970, and second off, because of a song that's on here. So this is a 1970 Imperials album. First thing that caught my eye is this one thing. Now this was a symbol that I know used to be really popular with Larry Norman. So again, there's a Larry Norman tie-in, and the fact that I found this right near the Larry Norman album. It's a 1970s album, Imperials. I figured, hey, that'd be kind of neat to check out what they were like then. It was in really good condition, and of course it was cheap. But then and it's on the Impact label, just like Larry Norman was. Which, sorry, he's messing with things. Which explains what I found next. It has on side one a bunch of, it's like a bunch of what they called modern songs that they played, modern hits at that time. So, Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel, My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. I kind of wonder if they really understood what that song was about when they did that. Anyway, that was kind of out of place to me. Let It Be by the Beatles, Amen, a traditional song, and then they have this song here called, I don't know if you can see this, Sweet Song of Salvation by Norman. So what I found funny was it's a song from this album which came out the year before that album. So they covered a song on here, considered it to be mainstream music. Anyway, Sweet Sweet Song of Salvation, just a great song, but I had to hear what it sounded like when they covered it. So I bought this. It's in this just a cardboard, thick cardboard, and even the record feels thicker than what most records did at that time. I don't know if it was always brown or if it was supposed to be white and it's just faded with time. But the cover maybe it was like this because it looks almost like a paper bag, old time. Anyway, the cover's thick and in good condition. The vinyl was in great condition. Now here's what I found when I got home. I started cataloging it on Discogs, and I couldn't find my edition on Discogs because my edition, let's see, it'd be easier if I take it out of the sleeve. Let's see, can you see this? It says side 2, and then you flip it over and it says side 2. So I'm looking on Discogs trying to find my edition, and I found what it should have been, but I'm like, oh look, I've got a misprint edition with 2 side 2s. I just thought that was kind of neat, so I had to create a new entry on Discogs. Anyway, it was cool. I listened to it. It may not be something that I totally hold on to. It might be more VCLT. I just had to hear their version of Larry Norman's song, and it was cool. A little more mellow, but anyway, I'm not 100% sure. I like nostalgia of the old music. I like the nostalgic feel of the old music, and so having something in my collection from the 70s like that, early Christian music, I don't know. I may or may not let it go. If somebody out there really wants it and they're an Imperials collector, I can think of one person that I would probably send it to. But if anybody out there really wants it and they really ask me, then I will probably really consider it. Anyway, It's Saturday. It's way hot outside. I don't even want to go out there, but I probably will at some point venture out. Got some time, and I might hit some stores, so I may find something new. And if so, you'll see me again real soon. Anyway, thanks for watching. God bless. Have a great day. Woohoo! Gone.